Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Mossi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hi, welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews, Film and Television, International Edition.
Mm-hmm.
As we're covering this year a bunch of international films, this month will be science fiction, and this is our first episode on our second French film, Jetée. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Christopher Morgan.
Bonjour.
Scott Thurlow.
Living in the past.
Stephen Mosey.
Time travel.
Yes. So, Stephen, speaking of time travel, would you like to just continue with the funny logline?
Yes, I pulled this together from a bunch of different sources, but I'm going to go with Les petites manges du singe.
Les petites filles mange.
Oh.
So close.
I'm sorry in French.
Merde. Yeah. Nice.
Terrible. Anyway, Chris, would you like to tell us the plot of Les Jetées?
Sure. It's about a man who, as a child, sees this woman on the jetty at Orly Airport in Paris. But I guess that's a spoiler for the ending. It's always difficult to talk about a time loop. It's always when you're talking about a time loop. But all right, that's a spoiler too. But World War III happens, and most of the civilization of Paris are living underground now, and he is a prisoner in the new underground government, and the scientists grab him because they're testing people to see who can withstand time travel. Mm-hmm. They figured out a way to move people forward and back in time, and basically they keep sending him back in time where he meets a woman, and
the same woman from the jetty.
The same woman from the jetty, and they have a relationship, and she comes to accept the fact that he's here one moment, gone the next. I think she calls him her ghost or something. And they develop a relationship, and to the point where he's finally stabilized in time. And it's that moment the scientists pull him back and then push him back towards the future, where he meets future society. They give him a power source to bring back to the awful people that keep pushing him back and forth through time.
They bootstrap him.
Yeah. So he comes back, and he thinks the scientists release him, and he thinks he's about to be executed. People from the future come back and say, "Hey, you can come to the future with us." He says, "No, bring me back, because I'd rather spend what days I have left with the woman." He goes running towards the woman, and then one of the asshole scientists from the future shoots him dead. And at that moment, you realize that at the memory he has of the child, it was the woman and himself dying. So he saw basically his last moments.
And time loop.
And time loop.
And monkeys.
And monkeys. I thought it was great. I thought it was very compelling. And I guess we can get to style as to how the film was portrayed. But I loved it. It's 28 minutes, and I could watch it three. I could watch it 3 times in a row. I'm giving it a 3.
I am as well, and so if we hadn't mentioned, this is the inspiration from 1962. So it's like many of the concepts, the core framework is what 12 Monkeys, the American film, the Terry Gilliam film, took from, and that happens to be one of my favorite sci-fi time travel movies ever, if not my favorite one. So yeah, I was very excited to watch this little short piece. And yeah, it was great. It was fantastic. Like you said, a lot of it may go to style, but I was riveted from start to finish. And it's because it's only under half an hour, right? It gets to everything it needs to get to very well. It's paced perfectly. The story unfolds as naturally as can be. And yeah, I couldn't take my eyes off of it, and it was fantastic. And I'm glad I finally got to see the inspiration for one of my favorite sci-fi films that happens to be foreign in our journeys.
Yeah, well said. I mean, it's a really interesting flick. specifically because, and this is going to go a lot to style, but like, you know, it's worth mentioning right in the beginning that this is all done in still frame photography,
and narrated,
and with overhead narration and some like background French, which, you know, I didn't understand
There's also
because
a
I
little
don't
German
speak
there,
French.
I think, too.
Sure.
I didn't catch that, but sure.
Maybe Spanish. I don't know.
No, I took 3 years
No
of German.
English,
I'm
that's what I know.
Part of that sounds like,
Sure.
All I heard was murmuring.
Yeah, I mean there was
creepy whispering.
That's basically what it was, but it was really well done in terms of the plot. They set it up nicely, and so the thing is, I wonder if I would be a little bit lost in this if I hadn't seen 12 Monkeys beforehand, because that definitely fleshes things out a lot more. I will say that there were a couple points where the subtitles were a little bit difficult to read, and like they kind of flashed off the screen a little bit too quickly, I thought, a couple times. But other than that, like, I love the story, I love where it went, and you know, I despite the fact that I've kind of seen this before,
Sure.
in terms of like the time travel dynamic, this was actually the originator of this story, and I loved it. I loved seeing where 12 Monkeys came from, and I think that 12 Monkeys did this story justice, and I think that this does an original time travel story justice, even though there is that little bit of like bootstrapping, like giving a little nod to By His Bootstraps, which we have reviewed before. So
oh, yeah.
I kind of dug like all that the tie-ins that we have to this, but also like I think it stands on its own merits,
yeah, exactly.
and I think that it did a really good job telling the story. So I'm probably gonna give it a 3 as well.
I think it's fascinating that the reason he can go back in time is because he's so drawn to this woman, but to this actual moment,
single
of his
moment,
own death, which he doesn't realize at the time is his death, but and he's attached to that image, and really to establish his motivation, because there's no dialogue in this aside from the narration. You have to sell their relationship.
Good point.
And I think now they do sell it. And if I have a criticism of this, and this is the second time I'm watching it, they do labor a little bit. Majority of this movie is dealing with him going back to visit her, and then going around a garden, going around a museum.
There's like a 5-minute portion of the 28-minute movie that's like
just
on
them
that.
doing that.
Well, the thing I like about this stills, and I know they, especially with the woman, like she's lying in bed, and they show several stills of her, you know, in bed, like maybe rolling over, waking up, and the times they spend. I noticed a lot of it when you focus on her. It's kind of like you're seeing her through his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got the objective view with the two of them walking around the museum, but a lot of her story is told through his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing her, and there's like all little to use glamour shots. Even though that's, but no, seriously,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I know it's I can't phrase it any better than that. But if you look at the way she's shot, God, it's so hard to remove this from style or whatever. But in terms of a narrative, I noticed that a lot of she's the only one you get that focus, you get that from. So I had a lot of times where I felt like, you know, it's like, hey, we're looking at her from his perspective. It's just like we're being sold on what he sees and what his drive to get back in that. And I think that might have partially have a lot to do with the effectiveness of this being in stills rather than being a motion picture. I mean, because, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And no, I know it's cliche, but seriously, you don't have a moving picture, and you have this opportunity where you are capturing this person in this moment of time.
Sure.
So, I mean, I thought it was... we're going into style, but the style is also part of the narrative.
Well, on this then point is the fact that you had brought up, Stephen, that you might have been lost if you've never seen 12 Monkeys. I had never seen 12 Monkeys. I got the closed time loop at the end, but it is sort of a rush twist thing. I think it works well. I'm not saying I think it should have been slowed down at all. I just think that it's right there. It's like all of a sudden it's right there in the movie.
Yeah.
But I think that they did a really good job of giving you just enough of the future to have a sense of what's going on without having to actually explain anything.
Yeah. By the way, now that we've talked about the entire plot, if you haven't seen this yet, stop this right now. You can get it on YouTube. It's 20 minutes long. Go watch it before you listen to the rest of this. Sorry, go on.
Now that we mentioned everything, I'm talking about the underground and their science.
Yeah,
behind
no,
it.
Yeah,
You know,
I got you.
And like the future is very mysterious as it should be. I don't know. I think they handled everything pretty well. So I'm going to give it a 3.
Nice. We're good.
All right. 3's all around, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Scott. Themes.
Yeah, so I mean, love, death, memories, war, future, humanity. Like, there's a lot of stuff like crammed in there, sort of. And yes, it's framed through like one man's like journey, like as his childhood memory, and then that informs like it's the anchor essentially in which the remnants of the post-war society uses to achieve their own ends. They basically want to find the MacGuffin that can keep them going. So they're doing all these experiments. The narration makes it clear that they've been volunteering, in quotes, other prisoners for these experiments, and they found the one guy who has a very strong attachment, as you said, to this one moment, this one memory that will possibly be like the catalyst that they need to go forward with their experiments. And yeah, and then it's framed like their relationship, like because he's drawn to this woman in various parts of like he's like drifting in and out of her life because he's being pulled back and forth through time. So like they have a connection there. Like it just says a lot in a very small time frame. You know, like then they send him. The whole point is to stabilize the experiment technology to send them forward to the future to get sustainability. You know, the magic MacGuffin technology that will then allow them to survive and go on. So yeah, I mean it's a closed time loop. Like you all the time travel stuff that often goes along with that. Like one of you mentioned by his bootstraps. It's very similar to that in that angle. And yeah, I think it's all very nicely handled. None of it's like overpowering. It's a bit more nuanced and subtle than perhaps a lot of these things are. But I think that's a credit to it. I think they are able to nicely balance a number of these things in there, again, without like distracting from the main like actual narrative, like the story of this guy and what he's going through in the post-apocalyptic future and these time travel experiments that are being run upon him. So yeah, I think I'm going to give it a pretty strong 1. Like I like the way, like I said, it was all balanced and inserted and really well melded throughout.
Yeah, there is this like really interesting theme of how tied we are, how our present and future is tied to our past and shaped by it, and you know, and like I love, and this is the same sort of thing in 12 Monkeys, which is kind of my frame of reference for this. Like, and you know, I've seen 12 Monkeys several times at this point, so I'm kind of looking at it through that lens, I guess. But like, there's this connection to the past that, like, there's a strong connection to the past that kind of makes you that you realize has impacted who you are as a person, even though things are like in this movie especially, like things are so different for you than they were in the past. You have this one like instructive or defining moment that you kind of keep thinking back on, and like it's an interesting delve into like what that is and like why those moments are so mold you so much or shape who you are so much. I like that a lot. There's also like this theme of kind of just the idea of this like defining stranger, right? Like this woman that he's never actually met before is something that he can never get out of his head. And I think that you could insert a lot of different things in there for the woman in this movie and the woman in 12 Monkeys, if we're talking about that to a degree. But like, you know, you could have like these moments that you just can't get out of your head for whatever reason. Like there's no real reason that you keep thinking about them, but they do stick
so
with you,
meaningful, yeah, exactly.
And they shape kind of the way that you move forward in life. And I love that they kind of like delved into that a little bit in this. So it's gonna be one for themes for me for sure.
And interesting, kind of build up what you're saying, but a slightly different angle. That memory isn't continuous; it's discrete. In that we remember things in snapshots. In a sense, we have focused on one specific frame in our memory. Like witness the man dying in front of him.
Yeah.
You don't see that picture. You see the woman, then that's what he was drawn out of that situation. And all the little things are like what's important to the main character. You're not seeing him walk through things. You're actually seeing what drew his attention at that moment. And I think that's a piece of art work. And this is going to style heavily too. But you don't get to see very often with a motion picture. But that is something that you really get to see with the still frame.
Yeah.
So I'm giving a strong one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really know what to add. There's a when you're talking about a time loop, it's always about, it's like the chicken and egg thing almost, because there is a sense of regret that it's kind of like this weird paradox where when she was alive, he was a boy, but he became alive as an adult by going back there, knowing that the end was coming. So I agree with you guys. There's a lot going on here. For some reason, part of what my brain linked to was a sense of regret that things hadn't been different. So he was in his own way trying to correct them. So yeah,
so
definitely giving
it a
one.
bittersweet.
Yeah,
to it.
In a way, it kind of reminds me of this movie Miracle Mile, where this guy meets his true love the same day World War III breaks out.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, I don't know if it was based
like directly.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of things I can see drew inspiration from this film. So.
I feel you.
Okay, Steven. Antagonist.
The hubris of man.
By the way, we finally
World War
got your
III.
brother on camera.
Yeah, finally.
For those
Finally.
watching, there he was. He exists.
There's the the stranger.
He's traveling through time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess the scientists, I guess, are the strongest, like, at least concrete antagonists in this, or like man's inhumanity to man.
Of course, that's what I was trying to go for there.
Some shit like that, but like, yeah, it's like there is this real feeling of antagonism with just how it seems like almost unfair that he has to go live this moment again until it feels like it's great for him, and then as soon as it feels like it's great, they pull him away and send him to the future, and then they send him back in the past, and as soon as he runs towards what he, like, that place that he was really in love, or like, that he really loved, they shoot him in the fucking chest.
Which is funny because shortly thereafter, the world would have ended anyway.
Right.
So it's like he
could have just let him die in World War III.
He's
It was
lived
kind
for
of an
that
extra
moment.
asshole thing.
It's
Sure.
like he lived for that moment, and they're denying him that moment.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have a clear indication of who the antagonist was, but there was a clear sense of antagonism, I think,
I mean,
throughout.
yes, like them to him, but like in theory, right? They're doing this to have the human race survive. Like that's their whole thing. Now, yes, they're exploiting and abusing the prisoners in order to do that, and especially the nameless main character. So, like, yeah, of course, like on that angle, sure. But I'm not really sure also how to cut this one up. So, what do you guys think about it?
I was going to say, I wasn't really sure about what to, if I consider the scientist the antagonist or not. Because again, I go to my thing like, well, an antagonist can also be a catalyst. But considering one of those assholes went back in time just to shoot him before
Specifically just to be a dick.
yeah,
I guess,
so
yeah.
fine, and they are
Like, what the
dicks
hell,
that-
man?
I mean, they kind of are dicks the whole time. Like even when he succeeds in his mission, he
Well, like I said,
he expects to be
he's a tool.
executed.
The movie even said like he was just a tool for them.
So yeah, I'm gonna go at the end.
But
I'm gonna go.
we don't know that for certain. All we know is from his point of view on that. And second of all, if he didn't get shot there, he wouldn't have had the ability to, as a child, to have seen him self-die, and,
Right,
and gain the ability to
You're right.
go back in time.
It's the Heinlein
so,
thing.
I mean, like, I'm sorry, man's got to die.
Your ass gotta die.
Sometimes we have to sacrifice one person to save the many.
Is that the antagonist there then?
But did everybody get saved for sure? We don't know.
Well, not everybody.
Obviously, there's a future.
A
where
future
people wear
society
cool
existed,
nose
right?
stuff.
Yeah, they said that.
Yes, and
Yeah.
as
I
Spock
guess that
would
might be
say, the
the-
needs
It's
of the
being-
many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one.
I guess I might be leaning towards a 1 based on that. Like that's a pretty solid argument.
Oh, that was my argument for a 0.
I was
Well,
gonna
I thought
say, you didn't get
I
that.
thought you were arguing
The
for a
good
1.
guys.
No, I was-
they're good. There is no antagonist.
no, I got you were arguing for a 0 there.
I did not, but now well, then that reinforces my original. I'm quantum mechanically flipping back and forth between 0 and 1.
Schrodinger's
Schrodinger's score, yes.
Mott's. I am going to give it a
Are you falling
zero. I'm
asleep
going to give it
there?
a 0.
Yeah,
Z's. I'm Z's.
I think. All right, fine. It's. I apologize for misinterpreting your argument, but since you were arguing the way I originally wanted to give it, I think I will then reinforce that and go with the 0. Yes,
Is that going to be zeros all around?
Yeah, it's gonna be a 0.
I believe so.
Interesting.
Because assassinating somebody from the last moment isn't an antagonist. That's just being a dick at the last,
Or it's saving the future.
or it's saving the future. Yeah.
You know how you want to look at
Isn't
it.
that
Saving the
part of
future by
time
being a dick, of course.
They don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Exactly. So I'm going on to protagonist. This is kind of a hard one to judge, although I'm probably going to end up on a 1 for this unless someone comes up with a really good reason for not doing it. Because you're following a guy with no dialogue. But the guy does, especially when he's being kind of experimented on, gives a lot of good facial expressions
Yeah.
that I felt like very believable.
Conveyed emotion.
It's almost as like they say about play actors where
Mm.
they have to go like over dramatic,
Somewhat
to emphasize
over-exaggerated.
their emotions.
Yeah.
And that is the case where at times it's he's blandly in love, but at other times I feel that he's like kind of really being hurt by his situation of time travel and all of that. So I think it was interesting enough. The scenario surrounding him was more interesting than the character itself, but then again, the character isn't given any dialogue, isn't given anything besides facial expressions.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, there's a lot of depth there, given that the nature of it and like the way it's put together. So yeah, I mean, like, I think you can certainly get a lot out of his character, even though he doesn't say anything and it's all still expressions. But the way he utilizes that, I think, says a lot. Like, is able to connect with the audience pretty well.
And why did they send me the future with aviator sunglasses on?
Why not?
Because in 1962, that was the future.
Because it's France.
It was cool,
in
man.
1962, my
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, in the future, he becomes Lou Reed.
that's his real destiny. But no, I mean, it's pretty funny. But I do agree. Like, I think I will also go along with the 1 because of all that.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a 1 for me. I like the character. I like the arc, and yeah, it's the whole like tragic arc that he runs through, even without actual dialogue. I think that they put that character through his paces, and the actor does a good job with facial expressions and things like that. And it's gonna be a 1.
I agree. Nothing else to add.
Well, add to about supporting.
Okay. The supporting characters in this are the woman who is his motivation.
His time traveling
His
muse.
motivation. Yeah, his
I'll
time
say.
traveling muse, and the scientists and the people from the future. And it's kind of like they all weave themselves into the narrative. I mean, it's just like, well, he couldn't go back and see the woman were it not for the scientists, and he couldn't meet the people in the future were it not for the scientists and the people. He wouldn't have gone back to get himself killed. So what I'm saying is, he is kind of like, if you look at him, he's kind of ping pong between all the secondary characters in a sense. So I would say I'm going to argue that without those secondary characters,
He would never become Dictor. Oh, that's wrong. Sorry.
so yeah, I'm giving that a very strong 1. I think they're imperative to the narrative.
I mean, yeah, like you're right about that, but I was waving this one like it's weird because again, they're not like characters unto themselves, but they are also that. Like it's strange. I do like the ping pong thing, right? It's necessary for them to be there in order to have this plot at all. I'd probably say like the woman, like his dream woman, if you will, like literal dream, is most important one. Mm-hmm. But everyone, like you said, certainly plays their part. I would say maybe the future society people were like the least interesting, but they were still necessary in a sense. They were more of like a plot device, but they do fill out the loop as a whole. So
That's almost exactly what I was going to say. Without the supporting characters, there is no movie here. There's just like nothing. So I think this movie completely depends on its supporting characters.
Saying it's stronger than I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the strongest part of this movie, especially if you count because we gave antagonist 0. If you count the
Okay.
you know,
Yep,
the
that's fair.
future, not the far future people, but the present, I guess, people as the scientists as supporting characters. This movie is completely dependent on these characters to be a movie, and I think that I always want to say like, oh yeah, this character did a good job. This character did a good job. There's not much of a good job to be had above the narration of this. It's like you got the guy that's taking the pictures, who is the best supporting character of them all. Whoever actually took all the pictures in this and like set everybody up and like directed them to do what they were supposed to do. But yeah, I think that the supporting characters are perhaps other than possibly style, the most important part of this piece. And I'm going to give it a strong 1.
I really liked the post-apocalyptic fascist underground style, just the imagery of them.
Yeah.
I love how each timeline has a distinct imagery for its supporting characters. That you, even if you stopped paying attention and looked up, you could tell what timelines taking place.
Yeah,
in.
that is true.
And overall, and we had given a lot of credit for the protagonist. And I had mentioned that selling the relationship was a big part of this, and I think that even more so than the protagonist is the woman who actually really sold that love, or the blossoming relationship between them. So I'm going to give them a strong 1.
Yeah, that's all very fair. I think I will, in fact, indeed, come down on a 1 at the end of the day.
Scott, dialogue.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, it's going to have to be the narration. Nobody says a line. There are no spoken lines of dialogue. It's all expressions between characters. But I think some of the phrasing, like, it is quite poetic and sometimes darkly so, in a sense. Like, this is, I assume, a very spot-on translation. Like, and we've had, again, because we're doing international stuff, sometimes we'll be like, oh, translation was fine, but kind of flat, and maybe it's different in its native language. But I think, like, some of the lines themselves were, like, awesome shit. Like, shit that if you ever read it in a novel.
Empire of Rats.
Like, that was great. Like, so yeah, there's a lot of, like, nice little moments, little slices of like, description and so forth. And as a whole, it was perfectly fine. When it wasn't, like, sort of excelling into that, like, awesome, like, again, like me being me, I'm like, oh, that was a sweet fucking line. Like, it's really, really well put together. So I'm going to give it a lot of credit here. And since there only is that, I think it did a pretty good to great job overall.
Whoever the narrator was to me the quintessential French narrator. Just the tone of his voice,
it's almost like deadpan, but not quite, right? But it's sort of like, it's very clinical.
I imagine him smoking a cigarette the entire time. Just it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
reminded me of what's that cat?
The Le Henry thing.
Yeah, Le.
Oh, right, yeah.
Le Henry.
Sure.
Yeah.
I see what you mean, and yeah, that is funny, but
yeah, I think that. So I was gonna give this a 0 initially because there's no actual dialogue, but I think I'm probably convinced. Give me a minute to think it over, Chris. You say whatever you're gonna say.
Basically that there's precedent for this being considered dialogue. I mean, as there is precedent for nonverbal communication being dialogue. I don't see.
That's the other thing I was going to say.
I was going to say that the pictures do tell a story. The narration is part of that. The narration is dialogue. It, to me, is the dialogue of the film. It's the third line. I mean, it's getting a 1. I mean, sometimes you have dialogue in there. You have narration in there. Filmmakers put narration in there, i.e., Blade Runner.
Sure.
Because they think the audience is won't get it.
Likely true.
Yeah, but in this,
I didn't get
the narration was part of the story. I mean, it was the dialogue of the film. So I'm giving it a strong 1.
Yeah, I'm like, one more point before you decide.
Sure.
Even if you remove that, think about, like, we've done it, you said precedent, like on Chaplin film, people's expressions can be its own dialogue. And I think that's very effective too. Now, granted, you might say that's bleeds over the style, but I think you can throw that also into dialogue.
I think the nonverbal dialogue in Chaplin is much stronger than in this, but
Sure, but you know what I mean.
That notwithstanding, I think that there is certainly precedent for talking about things other than our standard definition of dialogue as dialogue, especially in this show. And yeah, the narration is awesome. Like I'm not trying to take anything away from that. And if I'm looking at that as dialogue, I'm gonna give dialogue a very strong one. So
All right.
I'll be sweet on that.
Very nice.
For sure.
It deserves it. So, Steven, be sweet on style.
So the style, I think, was one of the strongest parts of this movie. It's a very interesting film in that, you know, we mentioned this earlier, but it's all still frame photography, black and white.
Yep.
Came
Very
out
stark.
Came out in 1962, so you know, color photography was around at the time. But this is a stylistic choice for sure, and I think it looks awesome. There's a lot of things I could mention in terms of style because this movie has style in spades. But one thing that I want to mention before I shut up and let you guys talk is that the use of shadow in this film is so good. It's so good.
Yeah,
It's like the shots that they get with there are like so many shots where like just shadow blackness covering the eyes. You can't like like this idea of like you can't see what they're seeing, or like they can't see what's going on. And just the use of shadow to convey the feeling of the scene is awesome in this. And there's a lot more to it, but there's a lot more to the style of this film, but I'll let you guys talk.
I was going to say, to your point, I like some of the pictures were clear and some of the pictures were grainy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna add to that because it's like dreamlike, like he's being shipped back and forth through time, like and using a memory as an anchor to that, right? So sometimes it's more in focus, sometimes it isn't, and like the stark contrasting shadows, like I noticed that, and that's probably also a standout. But I'm saying like the feeling and the mood they're going for, the style then matches that because it's like again sometimes blurry, like they're jumping back and forth between locations and it's disorienting, and that all makes sense. So yeah, it all builds up to itself.
And since Steve-O didn't mention this, I am going to mention Trevor Duncan's score. The music in this was incredible.
I thought it was fine, actually.
I thought it was extreme. I thought it was extremely.
It's extreme.
Am I extreme? I can't.
I thought it matched well, but
yeah, I thought it was really important to the narrative. I was really taken by it. It wasn't. It was really present when it needed to be. It was reserved when it needed to be.
I'm just saying, I just didn't know it as much, but I didn't think it was horrible or like out of place. But so
okay, sound design first of all was fantastic and needed to be to sell this movie because you don't get the motion, but that allows it to have a sense of, I guess, causal flow.
I like that
watching a still image. And also, the director's choice between how quickly they transition between different still images was brilliant. Again, for faking motion when there was... Not that they did it too quickly, but they'll have them walking down a park and they'll be seeing like the little girl behind them like running down the way, so it gives that illusion. When World War III happens, it's very quick with transition between shots of Paris and shots of rubble. And then there's very slow shots that building up. So I don't know. There's a lot that went on here, and I mentioned this earlier. Costume design is both great and
just a little silly,
budgetary.
But like I felt they did a lot with little.
Yes,
and
that's
still had a very creative and very influential costume design too.
I think you said it kind of in the beginning, where they showed you enough to kind of like, they didn't need to show you all the bells and whistles, but they kind of showed you enough, even if it was like, not like an effects heavy thing or a prosthetic heavy thing, but they showed you enough for your mind to fill in those things. I'm paraphrasing, I think, what you said.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I would be remiss to not mention, as much as I loved everything, and I think this is probably a transfer issue. There were a couple audio dropouts in the
I
narration.
noticed it once or twice, but I think it is more of an artifact
And
of that.
I don't think it's part of the original film. I think that it was just like, it happened in transferring it or something.
Sure.
But
I mean, when you bring something through time,
Yeah.
things are lost.
Gets a little bit distorted. But no, overall, very strong style. Possibly the best part of this film.
All right, and I'm on to recommendation, and I did recommend this. I saw this in a film festival at one point in my past. It had that one image that stuck with me,
is that the moment you keep going back to?
and I came back to it now, and I brought you guys along with me.
Nice.
Thank you.
I
Very
hope
well
enjoyed
done.
it as well.
I highly recommend this, as I think I spoiled it before in my own little time loop. That I could really just watch it consecutively, because there's, as Steve pointed out, there were some of the subtitles that seemed to go really quickly, and it's one of those things where it's deceptive. It's like that old Bugs Bunny cartoon where the guy could talk for an hour and it could be like one little sentence, and he could say like 3 things and it could be this whole paragraph. But aside from that, it is a great movie. I highly recommend it. I definitely will watch it again.
Yes, I very much recommend it. Like we said, it's short. You can get to it easily. And given that, again, it's attached to one of my favorite American films, that it's weird that like I haven't actually seen it till now, and I'm glad I have, because it's very interesting and really well done. Like, again, even removed from the attachment to it, it's a great art film from a French art film from the 60s, and I think it still stands. Still, you can get a lot out of it even today.
Yeah, I think you should watch it.
Well stated.
Well done.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, on that note, I
What
will
do we got?
go forward in time.
What are the
to give
time scores?
Scores, 9s are all around, giving a 9 overall, which is perfectly good in my book.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Acceptable.
I think it's almost like my final thoughts, like maybe not a lost film, but it probably isn't as known or remembered as it might, as it could or should be. But
It's known in certain circles.
right, but not as broadly as maybe some other things. But I think it possibly should be.
I can't believe I didn't watch it before now. I'd heard about this, and then once the internet came into life, and there's 100 different times I should have looked up this film.
Hold on.
Once the internet came into
Did
life,
you say once the internet came to life?
I heard.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, let me put this
They
in
had to send
context.
somebody back in time.
Let me put this in
I'm
context.
sorry. Hold on.
Oh, no,
Al
hold on a
Gore.
second. No. Let me. Yeah, I'm
No,
sorry. I did not
fine.
invent the internet.
Don't need a rant.
No, I obviously saw 12 Monkeys when it came out in the 90s.
Why is that obvious? Don't worry about it. Don't answer that question.
Fuck you. Anyway, no, I had met up with some people, and they said, "Oh no, 12 Monkeys is based on this film La Jetée," and it's one of those films I've been meaning to see. And once I actually had a computer,
Those people are terrible friends for not showing you this 25-minute movie.
yeah, well,
Like,
again,
all they had to do was be like, look,
they
it's
saw
gonna
it
take
when they were
25
in
minutes.
France or some crap like that.
Yeah,
But-
pieces of shit. They didn't have the internet.
yeah, fuck them. I don't know who they are anymore.
Well, 9 is very strong, and I think it has earned and deserves it.
Okay, well, I'm Jonathan E. Manzer, here with Christopher Morgan,
Au revoir.
Scott Thillo,
Adrift in time.
and Stephen Rossi.
And I hope the people that Chris just shit on see this podcast. Good
I
night.
don't remember the name.
See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or Mott's?